She always thought the worst thing her brother ever did to her was take her voice. She was wrong. The worst thing he did was make her deserve to have it taken. Claudette was 31 years old the morning. She stood in the parking lot of a Dollar General in Memphis, Tennessee, counting quarters in her palm to see if she had enough to buy a can of soup and a box of crackers for dinner. She had 47 cents. She needed 68. She stood there long enough that a woman coming out of the store stopped and asked if she was okay. And Claudette said yes, fine, thank you, because that was what she had been trained to say her entire life. Fine. Everything is fine. She drove home, which wasn't really home. It was a room she was renting by the week from an older woman named Mrs. Fontaine who left casseroles outside her door sometimes without explanation. And she sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her hands. These hands had written lesson plans for 4 years, had graded hundreds of essays, had held her daughter Ivy's hand through every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school, and now they were counting quarters in a parking lot. She thought about how she got here. She always ended up thinking about how she got here. Her brother's name was Gordon. Gordon Ellis Beaumont, 4 years older than Claudette, their mother's favorite and the keeper of everything the family owned, managed, and decided. That was just how it was in the Beaumont household. Their father had died when Claudette was 9, and Gordon, at 13, had stepped into the role with a seriousness that their mother called maturity, and Claudette would later understand was control. He managed the life insurance payout. He decided where they vacationed. He chose which college Claudette applied to, and more importantly, which one she didn't. She had been accepted to Northwestern on a partial scholarship. She found out because a letter arrived and she happened to get to the mailbox first. It was the only time she ever got to the mailbox first, and she understood later that this was not a coincidence. Gordon had been intercepting her mail. But this one slipped through. She was 17, and she stood in the driveway holding that letter with both hands, and she felt for the first time in her life like the future was actually hers. She showed her mother. Her mother called Gordon. Gordon came home from work early, sat down at the kitchen table, and explained, calmly, the way he always did everything, with that particular stillness that was more frightening than shouting, that Northwestern was too far, too expensive, and that Claudette had a responsibility to this family. Their mother nodded along. Claudette looked at her mother's face and waited for something. For the smallest fracture, there was nothing. She went to the community college 20 minutes from the house. Commuted from home for 3 years. Gordon reviewed her class schedule each semester. When she signed up for a night class in creative writing her second year, he unenrolled her without asking. Said it wasn't practical. Said she needed to focus on something that would actually help the family. She got her teaching certificate. She got a job at an elementary school across town. She told herself this was enough. This was a life. She met a man named Wesley, and she liked him immediately because he laughed easily and seemed genuinely uninterested in controlling anyone. And she married him at 26 in a small ceremony that Gordon half attended, sitting in the back row with the expression of someone enduring an inconvenience. Wesley was a good man. She wants to be clear about that. He was a good man who made a series of choices that unraveled everything. And she does not hate him, but she also does not think goodness alone is enough to hold a life together. Wesley lost his job. Then he found another one. Then he lost that one too. Then he stopped looking. The money they had saved, the money Claudette had been quietly setting aside for 3 years in an account she had told no one about, not even Wesley, because she had grown up learning that your money was only safe when it was secret, started to disappear. She didn't know where it was going at first. Then she did. He was not a cruel man. He was a careless one. There is a particular kind of damage that carelessness does, and it does not leave bruises, so people don't always take it seriously. By the time Ivy was 2, they were behind on rent. Claudette went to Gordon. She hated herself for it the moment she walked through his front door and saw the small, satisfied look on his face. The look of a man who had been waiting. But she had a 2-year-old and no other options, and pride is a luxury you set aside when you have a child who needs to eat. Gordon gave her the money. Of course he did. And then he attached to it the invisible thread he attached to everything he gave, the kind you couldn't see until it was already around your throat. He called her every week after that, asked where she was spending money, suggested she reconsider some of her lesson plans. He had heard from their mother that she was teaching a unit on women in history, and didn't she think that was a little one-sided? He started stopping by the house unannounced. Wesley didn't say anything about it because Wesley was already emotionally somewhere else by then, already halfway gone. It was Claudette who had to open the door. Claudette, who had to sit across from her brother at her own kitchen table. Claudette, who had to listen to him explain her life back to her like she was a student who hadn't understood the assignment. The afternoon that broke something permanent in her. She doesn't call it the worst moment because there were worse ones, but this was the one that changed her, was a Tuesday in October. Ivy was 3. Claudette had just gotten home from school, still in her work clothes, and Gordon was sitting in her living room. He had a key. She hadn't given it to him. She suspected Wesley had, and she had asked Wesley about it once and he said he didn't remember. Gordon was sitting in her living room and he had gone through her mail. He had a stack of it on the coffee table in front of him, opened, and he was looking at a bank statement. He looked up when she came in. He said, "What is this account?" She said, "That's mine." He said, "You've been hiding money from your husband." She said, "I've been saving money for my daughter." He said, "Claudette, this is not healthy. This kind of secrecy in a marriage, I'm worried about you." And the thing that made her want to fold in half, the thing that still makes her chest tighten when she thinks about it, is that he said it with genuine concern in his voice. He had that skill, Gordon. He could make the thing he was doing to you sound like something he was doing for you. She asked him to leave. He said he would, after they finished talking. She said there was nothing to talk about. He said she was being emotional. She said, and she had never said this to him, not once in 30 years, she said, "Gordon, get out of my house." He left. He didn't raise his voice. He picked up his jacket, folded it over his arm, and walked out. And somehow that was worse than if he'd been angry. She stood in her own living room and shook for 20 minutes after the door closed. The account he found had $4,000 in it. Within 2 months, Wesley, who had apparently learned about it from Gordon, because the two of them were talking, because of course they were, had moved that money into their joint account and used most of it to pay off a debt she hadn't known about. She did not leave Wesley that day. She stayed another 1.5 years. She is not proud of this, but she also does not judge herself for it the way she used to, because she understands now that leaving is not simple when you have been taught your entire life that your judgment cannot be trusted. She left on a Wednesday. Ivy was 4. She had saved $1,100 in cash, kept in an envelope inside a bag of rice in the back of the pantry, the one place she was confident no one would look, and she put Ivy in the car seat and she drove. She didn't have a plan. She had a direction, which was away. She ended up in Memphis because her college roommate Diane lived there, and Diane was the kind of woman who opened her door without asking questions and made eggs and didn't say "I told you so." Claudette stayed with Diane for 6 weeks. She got a substitute teaching position. She found Mrs. Fontaine's room. She enrolled Ivy in a daycare 2 blocks away. She called her mother once during this time. Her mother said Gordon was very worried about her. Her mother said Claudette was making things harder than they needed to be. Her mother said, "You have a daughter to think about," as if she had forgotten this, as if Ivy was the reason to go back and not the reason she had left. She did not call again for a long time. The first months in Memphis were the hardest of her life, and also, strangely, some of the clearest. There is something about having very little that simplifies things. The noise in her head that had been there for years, the noise that sounded like Gordon explaining things, like Wesley's silences, like her mother's careful non-interventions. That noise got quieter when she was just a woman trying to feed her daughter and get to work on time. It did not go away, but it got quieter. She found a full-time position at an elementary school in Midtown. The principal was a woman named Dr. Okafor, who shook Claudette's hand at the interview and looked her in the eye and said, "I read your application. Tell me why you want to be here." And Claudette had said something honest. She said she believed that children needed at least one adult in their lives who saw them clearly, and she wanted to be that person. Dr. Okafor had nodded slowly and written something down. She got the job. It was not a high salary. It was enough. Ivy started kindergarten. She made a best friend named Poppy and spent 2 weeks talking about nothing but Poppy. Claudette drove carpool and learned the names of Poppy's parents and brought cupcakes to the class birthday party and tried to remember what it felt like to be a person who belonged somewhere. She started to feel it slowly, that belonging. Gordon found her phone number in the spring. She didn't know how. She suspected their mother, though she could never confirm it. He called on a Sunday afternoon, and she almost didn't pick up. And then she did, because there was still some part of her that had not finished being trained. He said he was calling to check on her. He said he had heard she was managing. He said managing was good, but he wanted her to know the door was always open. And by door he meant the family. By family he meant him. If she ever needed help. He said help in the way that contained within it everything the word had ever cost her. She listened to him talk for 4 minutes. Then she said, "Gordon, I need to tell you something." And she said it calmly, without shaking, which surprised her. She said, "I know you believe you have been taking care of me. I know you have told yourself that story for a long time. But what you have been doing, reading my mail, speaking to my husband about my finances, showing up in my house uninvited, making decisions that were mine to make, that is not care. That is control. And I am not going to pretend anymore that I cannot see the difference." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Claudette, I think you've been through a lot and maybe you need to talk to someone." She said, "I am talking to someone. I'm talking to you. And I'm telling you that this is the last time." She hung up. Her hand was shaking after all, but she had said it. She had said it out loud to the person who needed to hear it, and there was something on the other side of that sentence that she had not expected. Not relief exactly, but the first breath of something that could become it. She changed her number the next day. She does not pretend the story ended there, neatly, the way she might have wanted. Her mother still calls sometimes, from a number Claudette doesn't always answer. There are nights Ivy asks about her uncle and Claudette has to find words that are honest without being a wound. There are mornings she wakes up and the old voice is back, the one that says she has made everything harder than it needed to be, that she is selfish, that a different woman would have found a way to keep the peace. She is learning, slowly, imperfectly, on the days she has enough sleep and on the days she doesn't, to talk back to that voice, to say, keeping the peace is not the same as having one. Last spring, Claudette's fourth grade class did a unit on people who chose hard things. She had the students draw pictures of someone they admired. Ivy, who was in her class, which is a complicated thing she navigated carefully, drew a picture of a woman driving a car with a little girl in the back seat. When Claudette asked Ivy who it was, Ivy said, "That's you, Mama. That's when you were brave." Claudette had put the drawing in her desk drawer and waited until after the last bell to cry. Because she was at work, and she was professional, and also because there are some things you need to hold for a moment before you let them open you up. She has $4,000 saved. Not in an envelope in a bag of rice this time. In a real account with her name on it and only her name. Ivy is 7 now. She has Claudette's eyes and her father's laugh and an opinion about everything, which Claudette encourages, loudly and often. They are okay. They are more than okay, on most days. And on the days they are not, Claudette makes soup and puts on a record and sits with Ivy on the kitchen floor, and they eat dinner like that, cross-legged, with the dog pushing his nose into everything, and it is small and it is theirs and no one gets to take it from them. That is not nothing. After everything, that is not nothing at all.